You know, Feroze, I know a lot of people like bank fixed deposits, right? But I've often been wondering what's a good alternative, to give to people who like bank FDs. Is a fixed maturity plan the right fit in that sense? I mean, like a bank FD on an adrenaline rush?
You're absolutely right, Sumaira. I think we as Indians love our fixed deposits. That's exactly why there's so much more money in fixed deposits than in equity in India. And FMPs are certainly a good alternative for a fixed deposit investor.
So as the name denotes, a FMP or a fixed maturity plan has a fixed or predefined maturity, and they're closed-ended debt funds.
As you rightly pointed out, Sumaira, a closed-ended fund begins on a specific day and closes at another specific day. So all investors who have invested in the beginning need to stay invested till the end, and there could be no fresh investors who can enter this fund during the life of that fund. If an existing investor wishes to quit the game, he needs to sell it to another person and not back to the asset management company. FMPs actually comprise of money market instruments, corporate bonds, commercial paper, all of them which are debt instruments.
And each of these investments would actually have the similar maturity as the FMP plan that you have invested. But Feroze, what are the risks that are associated with it?
Of course, there would be risks to investing in an FMP. The primary risk is the liquidity risk, because if you invest in an FMP, you are not able to take back your money unless you found yourself another buyer whom you could sell your units to. So that's the primary risk. The second risk is if you buy bonds or commercial paper and in turn lend to corporates, if the corporate does not have the capacity to repay it back, and if that risk happens, that risk, which is called the credit risk, fructifies.
But Feroze, given that there are no guaranteed returns, right, like in the case of an FD, would the returns match up to the kind of risk that investors are taking?
The returns on an FMP have generally been 1 to 1.25% greater than a bank fixed deposit, because in a bank fixed deposit you're lending to one specific bank, and banks generally are not as generous as an FMP when it comes to return.
Well, what about the taxation then?
In fact, on taxation, FMP scores very well, because in a fixed deposit you end up earning interest income, and the tax on the interest income is supposed to be computed as per your marginal tax slab. In case of an FMP, you get indexation because the gains which you make are categorized as capital gains and in the long-term category, provided the FMP was 3 years plus.
So what is indexation really? Indexation means adjusting the principal amount for inflation and then calculating the gains on them. So let's say you've invested 10,000 rupees in an FD for 3 years and the total interest earned is 3,000. This 3,000 rupees is taxable under your income tax slab. Now consider the case of an FMP with the same duration and the same gains. So let's say because of inflation, 10,000 rupees 3 years back is the equivalent of 10,500 rupees now. The additional 500 rupees will be deducted from your total gains, and only 2,500 rupees will be taxed.
And a few FMPs which spill over across 5 financial years can give you 4 indexations and make it even more tax efficient. So it's important to understand FMPs, and it can actually be an integral part of one's portfolio, especially on the debt side. A gilt fund is a mutual fund which collects all the monies and invests in bonds issued by the government. The government borrows money from individuals like you and me, or even a mutual fund manager, to bridge the gap between its income and expense for a particular year. A mutual fund which actually has several bonds of different maturity of Indian government is called a gilt fund.